There's a principle that what's done in secret will be shouted from the rooftops, as we see crimes buried by time come to light eventually. All crimes are a tragedy, but particularly against the child who depends on adults for their safety, succour and well-being. The greater the period of time to see justice reach makes that tragedy a greater burden. Even if the person is no longer a child, they still carry the wounds of that horrible abuse too many times into adulthood. I doubt there's one person in this chamber who does not know someone who was subject to child abuse and knows how this has impacted their lives. Many who have had that experience have shared bravely through their submissions and through their advocacy. This legislation cannot undo the harm, but it can provide avenues of redress which were previously denied due to the passage of time. This bill promises to remove the civil statutory time limits for personal injury arising from child abuse in institutions, and it's a step in the right direction. The government's bill doesn't deal with abuse outside of institutions. We're saying it should, and that is the substance of amendments from my colleague, the member for Mansfield, and Shadow Attorney-General, who will seek to move to make it possible to sue for civil redress also for non-institutional abuse. We're also saying that if you've entered into a deed of settlement outside of that time, there should be a power to apply to the court if it wasn't a just and fair settlement for it to be reopened. This is not lightly suggested, and I note the Attorney-General's concerns. However, I believe that there are safeguards in that it's not an automatic reopening. However, it recognises that sometimes these deeds may not have been entered into fairly, that the substance of the issues that are now brought to light would mean that they would be cast in a very different circumstance. For many victims, it could take years before they're able to speak. Some still can't speak about their personal experiences. It wasn't their fault that they felt shame or that they wore the damaging impact of the original crime that made their suffering and vulnerability even greater. That's why the statute of limitations for civil action was so unfair. Pedophilia and child abuse in general are some of the most heinous crimes, as they are committed against those who are powerless as children in the care of others. Children are not the chattels of adults and adults' personal whims for their wants. Children are precious and deserve the protection of law. They deserve the protection of adults and recognition that their experiences as children last well into adulthood. This legislation steps in the right direction, and I hope that the amendments can also help in that journey to justice. These changes in law can't heal all hurts, but they can provide avenues for a redress. And towards that, I acknowledge the bravery again of those who advocated for what we believe is a fair and just amendments to legislation.
Member for Moggill.